Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Shock Absorber podcast. As usual, I am here, your co-host Joel, but I am not, as usual, coming from the Third Space Studio in Kirrawee. I am coming from my study, and the reason for that is because we're just taking a break over the next couple of weeks from recording new Shock Absorber content, but we didn't want to leave you hanging. For the last couple of weeks, you would have noticed we've brought you a few different sections from our Shock Absorber conference that we held in 2021, in October 2021. Now it's time to bring you the third part of that conference. And we were discussing implementing the Shock Absorber. And then we brought on our planning pastor, Jai McMorty, to discuss this. Jai has been part of the Soul Revival youth community at Guyman Anglican Church. He became a pastor at Guyman Anglican Church, and then also went out to work at other different churches before returning to the Soul Revival community after we had planted Soul Revival Church. He's now a planting pastor. So he has a ton of experience implementing the Shock Absorber in different environments. So if you're thinking about involving intergenerational ministry as part of your ministry, or you want to explore more of an intergenerational ministry expression, this is where I think you're going to learn a lot. So I hope you enjoy it, hope you learn a lot. And at the end of the episode, I'll be there to tell you how you can get in touch with us. But for now, enjoy this part.
Well, as we do come back into our last section, we're going to be thinking about implementing our shock absorber. What has it actually been like to put this into practice? As Stu mentioned earlier, we have started talking about different phases and different size vehicles. It might be a Vespa. You might just start with a very small group of people trying to implement some of these principles. Maybe you're up to the Mini, and you've got a few more people you can pack in. Maybe you've got a combi, maybe you've got a transporter, maybe you need the 100-seater, I don't know what fits 100 people, something bigger than a transporter. A yellow submarine. Maybe you need a yellow submarine like the boys have there on the table. But we're going to talk about implementing that. What does it actually look like to put all this into practice? So I'm going to pass back over to Joel. Thanks, mate.
Well, Tim, I think you're doing an outstanding job. So thank you so much. We're also providing free IT support from Adam. So that was great. It's been a great day today. I'm joined back on the panel by Stu, of course. And then of also, Jai, you're coming back.
I'm back.
Couldn't have enough. You couldn't get enough of us.
I went and had something to eat while you did hospitality. No.
Okay. The reason we got you on, Jai, is because I think your experience really speaks to what we're doing. So you, just a little bit of history we can talk about for yourself, is that you became a Christian and started going to Soul Revival while it was at Guymer Anglican Church.
Yep.
You then became a youth pastor at Guymer Anglican Church through that. Then moved away to a couple of different churches,
Yep.
and now you're back to help us. And you actually came to plan our two first offsite gatherings,
Yes.
which are Cronulla, was Woolooware, now
Yep.
Cronulla, and it's also Yarrawarra. So we thought it was awesome to get you on because you've had experience being part of the shock absorber as you grew up, trying to implement shock absorber principles at churches that probably adopted a homogeneous unit principle approach. And then you also come back to implement a shock absorber from the very scratch of beginnings. So I think that's a great opus. Not an opus. What's the?
I like that word. Opus.
Body of work.
Opus is better.
Okay.
I like opus.
Okay. So it's your opus.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Well, that's all right. Well, please, if you wouldn't mind getting into it, and let's hear how those kind of experiences helped you to implement shock absorber in different scenarios.
Yeah. So happy to talk about the two churches that we're at prior to coming back to Soul Revival Church to plant our two gatherings, or offsite campuses, I should say, where we learned a lot. In the first one, we tried to change things at the second one, and third time lucky. Hopefully, we get things a little bit more succinct. But one of the things that we did learn very early on is that engagement and in communication with as many people as possible is really important. So as a youth, I was a youth pastor, a youth minister, and assistant minister. Having conversations with my senior minister was really important to make sure that or find out what I could do and couldn't do. That was really important. I'm going to go make all these changes and then get told I can't do it. That was really important. But one thing that we didn't do the first time around, which we did the second time, was actually engage the rest of the church. So in both the churches that we were part of, we looked after youth ministry and we looked after the Sunday evening gathering. And that's the one where we made the changes and tried implement these things. But the first time we didn't talk to the other gatherings, the other services, where in the second time around, we tried to do that a little bit more and probably could have done better at that even second time around. Because what ends up happening, and what we found, was that we got a lot of complaints from people saying that we're stealing people from their gathering or their service, when that wasn't the truth, or that wasn't what was happening. What was happening is we were doing something, people from the other gatherings were like, oh, we'll go and see what's happening, and go, oh, this is really great, and stayed. And so it was one of those things where communication is really important across all the gatherings as you make these changes. And I guess the other thing that we learned from the first one in particular is thinking about things as a long-term goal, not immediate things that are going to happen straight away. So it's not like you can, you hear at this conference, you're listening to all the wonderful things that we've been talking about. You may even have one-on-one chats with Stu and Joel and go, well, okay, next week we're going to start and it's going to happen. It takes a long time to get these things going. And it's good to think through, well, this is where we want to be. What are the steps for us to get there? And what are the changes that we need to make? Because as much as you or I might like change, there are a number of people in our churches that struggle with change. They feel uncertain and unstable in change. So change at a slow pace is a good thing. But there will be some things that need to be changed early on to set up those further changes. So the last church we were at, the youth ministry was on Sunday afternoon before the 7 p.m. church. It's half-hour gap in between. That meant that we couldn't change anything really with the service. We couldn't do, our youth leaders were pretty much all dead in the water by the time they got to the church service, so there wasn't much that they could do. And the adults, we had a very consumeristic culture in the church. You just came and was served and then went home. And so the very first thing we had to do was actually move the youth group from Sunday to Friday. And we did that pretty early on, which then meant that we had an opportunity to move the Sunday night to 5, where we did, coffee and then moved into 5:30 church. The other thing that we found really helpful too, again, learnt from the first time we did this, and it worked much better second time around, was getting a team together. It doesn't work if it's just one person trying to push this, or my wife and I are trying to go, well, this is where we need to go. But actually getting people who are actually on board and wanting to do it. Within an existing church, it's almost like a core team or a launch team within a larger team, I guess. I don't know how that would work, but that's the kind of idea. But what we realized the first time is we had mainly young adults in our team, and we actually didn't connect well with those older than us. And so the second time around, we had a much larger team and diversity of ages. So we had one couple in there who had grown up in the church and were about to retire, to a young, awesome bloke who had just finished high school and was doing a gap year. And so that was the range of ages in our team. And that allowed us to connect much more fluidly and easily with this idea and with the all ages that are there. But it also meant too that we actually could model what that looks like to the whole church so they could get it. And I think that was really important, that modeling, because we realized too that there wasn't a hospitality culture in our church. And so Christine and my wife and I decided that it needs to start with us. So we would just be inviting people over in large groups. We'd have 15, 20 people over at our house, all from, not necessarily people who knew each other particularly well, but we just have them over and just share a meal together to try and get that culture going, so that again, it's a short-term change for a long-term goal. That makes sense. And so we tried a few of those little things here and there to try and engage as many people as we possibly could and make those changes to be at least clunky and soft. And I guess to having a team, everybody owned it. It wasn't just coming from one person too. And so, we really wanted to work hard on getting those relationships going across the board. We like what we do here now, we moved our kids ministry from during the service to before the service. So our kids pastor could be actually a part of our gathering and helping set that culture, because he was really excited about it as well and wanted to be a part of it. And that meant too that we could have more adults involved in our kids ministry, doing like a kids chill, which is what we do here at Soul Revival Church, and more older people getting to know the younger kids, and the younger kids getting to know the older ones. So we had, trying to foster those relationships like you're talking about with Bev and Pippa, which is, always brings a tear to my eye of just joy when I hear that story. And so, yeah, and we tried to do the dinners straight up and try and get people involved in that. And I think we moved too quickly on that, and we ended up falling back to a monthly potluck dinner, which was great. They were good. It got people hanging around and people involved. But there's a lot of people bumping into each other in the kitchen. Sometimes there was someone's meal who didn't, people didn't touch it. And so that caused a bit of, people to get upset. And so it was good, but it was a step towards doing something more regular and trying to also show people that catering doesn't have to be this, you don't have to do like a 5-course banquet type thing. It's just,
it doesn't have to be MasterChef.
No, it's a spag bowl or something like that, those sorts of things. So it was just moving towards those things.
There's a lot of spag bowling at Soli's back in the day, right, Stu?
Apparently, spaghetti bolognese is considered Australia's national dish. I don't know if you've ever looked that up, but I'm 100% behind that. I think that and dumplings are my two favourite food groups in the whole world.
Yeah, I'm not keen on the parmesan. I've got grated cheese on the spag bowl. It's been a new thing.
Very Australian of you to get rid of one of the Italian ingredients.
I don't mind the parmesan myself, but yeah, there you go.
So that your kind of learnings in terms of being outside a shock absorber type ministry.
Yep.
So when you come back to Soul Revival, which is what year? Sorry.
28 end of 2017. I think it was. Yeah.
We'll go with that. That's good. So since then, you've helped plant 2 gatherings, one at Yarrawarra, one at Woolooware/Cronulla.
Yep.
But then also we've started formulating our church planting model within that. So what I'd like to ask is that you weren't here for the first few plants, which is obviously fine, but I think that what it's allowed us to do is to see where we might be able to change things and certain things. I know that in season 2 of the shock absorber, we actually talk about with Woolooware, we actually think we may have missed the shock absorber to a certain degree. So I'd love to ask both of you guys, because you've been so involved in all of this, is what were the key learnings, do you think, from planting 5 all-age, all-stage gatherings across, since 2012?
Yeah, well, I think you hit the nail on the head with the Woolooware Cronulla one, is that we didn't have that all-age, all-stage involved in our launch team. And so we missed, I think, can't remember exactly, but there was a gap in that sort of teenage, young adult kind of, which, looking back now, we're trying, doing the commitment helpers, which we spoke about before, has been really helpful to try and bring people into that. But we didn't start with that, which.
And why is that important though, to if we did miss that kind of age range, why was that important that we should have looked at more, making sure that was there?
I think some people do, even though we're really embracing of intergenerational ministry, some people are looking for people their age group when they first come in, and they don't really understand the whole idea. It's a big family. So it does help having people at similar age to be there. And that's why I said earlier that, an idea between churches to network for some things, even if it's like taking Jim's idea and doing the Saturday night, every now and again, there might be a local church that would be willing to come visit as well to that particular gathering, so that if, say, some of the grandparents ask some of the teenage grandchildren to come along, there's other young people and they go, oh, okay, this is for young people as well. And that slowly starts to, just help people a little bit. So I think one of the things I'd like to say is that even though we do intergenerational ministry, some churches do intergenerational ministry by what's called the inclusive congregational approach by Milan Nell from South Africa. And he says do everything together all the time with all the different ages. We're a little bit different to that. We do have times where we come together as a family, even in worship, in the formal setting, but definitely in the dinners and stuff. But we also have times where we get the people of different ages together so they can also look after each other. I mean, one example of that at Guymer Anglican Church was when we had the year 11 and 12s coming up into the young adult ministry of Solies on a Saturday night, but we still had Matt and Lauren running that on a Friday night. And I don't know if Matt and Lauren want to comment on that, but one of the fun ways they kind of helped get that hospitality vibe going was, Lauren, I think it was with the ham and cheese tomatoes. Was it ham and cheese or ham and tomato sandwiches?
The
you used to
toasted
do?
sandwiches,
Toasted
yeah.
sandwiches, or was it Devon?
Sandwiches.
What was it, Lauren?
Well, cheese and tomato, but there was also a whole lot of Devon usually on a Friday night. So there was a whole lot of fresh bread, a whole lot of Devon, a whole lot of cheese and tomato sauce, and it was make your own adventure sandwiches on Friday night.
With irons, like you did the whole toasted iron.
Yeah, toasted. Yeah, so you could go fresh or you could go toasted, whatever took your fancy, as long as it was on the bench.
Unreal. Because I remember Matt one day, Matty, you were there with this big like pile of Devon
Yeah.
I think you're getting ready for the night. I'm like, what are you doing, Devon,
usual.
man? And you're like got this big pile of Devon. I'm like, righto. It was bringing
Friday
fun.
night signature.
Yeah, and it was bringing fun and something strange and different and funny, wasn't it?
Yeah.
You got anything on that, Matt?
Just you got to be careful what you wish for, because often, when the senior hires then graduated, they'd gift us with kilos and kilos of Devon. So we'd always have Devon in the fridge.
Still working through it now.
Yeah, that's right.
It's still working through your body now.
How Australian is that? Just quite.
Yeah, that's what the bio breaks are for.
Yeah. Actually, you got me thinking I'm going to have a Devon and tomato sauce sandwich tonight, I reckon, for dinner. I think that'd be nice.
Righto. You can do that. That's fine. Maybe you could Uber Eats it. Just before we get back into the discussion about that, I was just thinking, if anything comes up from you from what we're discussing, chuck the questions in the chat now rather than waiting for that time, because then we can come back to them when we do head into the discussion. How did the things that we learned turn into that church planning model that we talked about from the Vespa, the Beetle, and the Combi guys? Because I know that's a relatively new turn of phrase that we've started to bring into our lexicon. So how do we reach that point?
Yeah, so again, I think it was Grace and Michelle talked about this idea of connected community. And of course, we love to play around with things, and we came up with the idea of talking about Vespas and Beetles and Combis. And that kind of came from one of the lessons we learned, I guess, or one of the key learnings of the size of our launch team, where I think with both Woolooware, Yarrawarra, and our Sunday afternoon here at Kirrawee one, our teams were 12 or less for our launch team. And we realized that we probably needed to be more. And so this language of talking about Vespas and Beetles and Combis as in terms of sizes of church plants became this really helpful metric for us to understand what was needed, what needed to, I guess, from a Vespa, you don't need air conditioning because you're kind of just getting whacked in the face with air, so you don't need it. But when you get to a Beetle, you probably want some air conditioning, no.
Air cool car.
Just wind the windows.
Just wind in the window.
Yeah. So little things like that became helpful as we started to think about sizes and needs and things like that.
Yeah, I agree. And so starting off, we used to in our first one of the things we really love is iterations. So iterative approach it gives the church permission to try something with it, even if it fails, that's okay. Like, we're going to give it a go. We like to talk about SpaceX sometimes here at Soul Revival Church. I love how there's
some more than
well,
others.
I do. Okay, that is true. But I love how SpaceX are trying to take us to Mars, which is a big goal. So they break it up into little goals. So they start off by seeing if they can get a rocket ship to take off and land again, and they blow them up one after another. They're fantastic watching it. Now, we don't want to blow something up and hurt anyone, but the good thing about the SpaceX thing is they blow that up without anyone being in it. So you do safe practices to try new things. So you don't want to hurt anyone, but you can say build failure into the process. When we first started, Matt and I used to talk about greenhousing. That's another metaphor you could use for it if the iteration thing doesn't work for you. But when you start something new, you put it in the greenhouse, like a new little plant, so that it doesn't go out in the full sun and die straight away, but you can nurture it until it grows its root system deep enough so you can put it out in the garden. So this idea that we'd have a launch team of say 20 people or 30 people that could be in the greenhouse, whether we call it that or this new idea of connected community, it doesn't really matter. But the new connected community, like a really small group with not a lot of structure, it's not even a formal gathering. It's like a Bible study that is getting ready to see if they can grow their Bible study to be big enough to plant a formal gathering. So at the moment, West Ryde are going from that at the moment, from what we call a connected community with between 1 and 30 people. And then when they get to about 30 people, that's like the start of a formal gathering, and we're calling that a beetle stage. So it's just a classification for us so that we can go, let's actually think the structures we need when we first start as a Bible study group aren't that many. We don't need a lot of structure. You can have Devon sandwiches every week with 17 people in your house, and you don't need to have a lot of formal stuff. But as soon as you go to a formal gathering, it becomes more structured. And we've even recognised that even that will be different if it gets bigger again. So that's why we've gone those 3 different cars or vehicles to represent that, so that we can help communicate to our church that as we get bigger, we need a bit more structure. But it doesn't scare people. You don't have to have all the bells and whistles as you start. You can slowly grow into it. I don't know if that's helpful, but that's what I like.
That we can start planning for that next. We start building things before we actually get there, instead
That's
of
a good point.
just getting there and going, oh, we need to do this, this, and this.
What kind of structures would you prioritize in terms of when you start as a Vespa, for example? If you're very beginning, what were the ones that we would prioritize to begin with?
Yeah. I think welcoming is really important. I think the team that actually is organising the Bible teaching, that's really important. I think the hospitality, getting something together to do the cooking, having something for the kids straight away is really important as well. So I think at the very minimum, those sorts of things I think would be worth considering.
Is that that's what we're kind of doing if you were at the Vespa stage, you think?
Yeah. And then you can add more complexity to it as you get big. You might want to start thinking about doing a youth group and have a youth and young adults ministry when it gets a bit more. Now, you might not have any children in the church, but it's still good to have that there in case some children do come with a family, because then there needs to be some safe adults that can look after those children. So, but then as it gets bigger again, we develop more and more teams, like a world team that helps us to connect up with world missions, really important. Communications team to help communicate to people. So you can add some diversity as you go along, but it literally is like these vehicles. Like when you just, that Beetle over there, it's got 2 doors because you only need between 2 and 4 people in it. But this little car here's got a slot. Oh, this one's got bay doors. Look at this. This is real fancy.
Or the big one behind you.
Yeah, or the big one. Well, mine's got sliding doors, but this little model's got bay doors. That's pretty cool.
Suicide doors, I think.
It's got one at the back and it's suicide doors.
That's what they're called.
Okay, there you go. I didn't know that. And then 2 front doors. So, even that is, if you're going to put 7 or 8 people in a car, it needs to be a bit bigger. So I think what that does is when you first start out your ministry, you start going and if you go into a submarine, you only need 4 people in a submarine, the yellow submarine with Paul, George, and
Ringo
and John.
There you go.
My goodness,
Well
I'm
done.
a massive Beatles fan, and I pause there. That's dreadful. Anyway, so that the idea we've got here today is think of your church as a car. Where are you at? Like how big is your gathering? And ask the questions, what's really important for us at this size, but let's have an eye on what we need to develop and start doing that before we get there.
Yeah, it's part of that long term, that long game. Kind of have an idea on what you want to be and then how to get there. Yep.
And you always talk about building a bridge to a new reality. So you've got a lot of metaphors to start experimenting with stuff, which is really cool. Yeah. Any other learnings you wanted to add in there just before we go into the discussion?
I think we've got 10 service teams, which we see is really important for our gatherings. And when we first started Woolooware, we said we need 4 of those, which were pretty much all those things that Stu said. And we made sure that we had people in place for those things. But I think having those 4 people who were heading that up, trained and ready to go, and then also training people to step up into the next 6 things before actually needing them probably would have been something that would have been helpful then. And that's what we've been doing now is instead of trying to retrofit, we're getting people trained up and ready to go before.
Okay, cool. Well, let's turn to the Q&A discussion, Tim. If you're able to, has anyone put anything in the chat? Or am I going to have to call people out?
I think we're going to have to call people out. If you have questions about it, we are coming to the end. So if you got a burning question from the keynote at the start about hospitality, about the implementation that we've talked about in that section, or anything else to do with Shock Absorber, really happy to take your question. You can throw it in the chat, or you can raise your hand, or you can wave at me.
Yeah, Tim, I've got a question.
Excellent. Go for it, Amy.
I was just wondering, back when you first started meeting on a Saturday night, that was quite different to what was normal. And I'm just wondering, did it take much convincing of other people to give up their Saturday night to come and meet together? And like, how did you pitch it so that people came on board with giving up their Saturdays to do something new?
Yeah, that sounds really good. Is there anyone here from Soul Revival who goes on Saturday night that would like to share their thoughts on that? If there is, that'd be great. If not, I'd be really happy to jump in. But Joel, do you want to share thoughts, or anybody else want to talk?
I suppose when we first started, it was pretty easy because for us it was because we'd been having the youth and young adult community meeting on a Saturday night already. So I think it was almost, I mean, I could be speaking out of turn, but it was almost like a no-brainer for us. We were just like, yeah, we already do it on Saturdays, so let's just do it on Saturdays, and it works. Right? I don't know. You were leading that discussion a lot, so you and Matt. So that's where I thought we were going. But I think Amy's looking for, how did you talk about it? How do we discuss it?
Well, when we first pioneered it, it was a bit earlier with the youth and young adults, and it was a big conversation because people found Saturday night to be party night, and that's the night off every week where you have most fun. And we wanted to deconstruct that by saying, let's make Saturday night party night with Jesus, and let's see if we can hang out socially around the Word of God. How good would that be? And so some people found that to be a bit difficult. And I think over time, there was lots of different conversations we had, but over time, I think what we settled on was something that Oldenburg said. I mentioned him in the first talk. Oldenburg said that in a third place community that you're going to get regulars and irregulars in your group, and there'll be the regulars that are really committed to something, and then irregulars that kind of just hang around on the outside of it a bit more and don't really feel super connected to it. And I think with Saturday night, the first thing was to get a group of people as regulars who would like to share life together and do life together on a Saturday night, that would enjoy doing that whether anyone else came or not. And it wasn't crucial for other people to be a part of it. And we enjoyed it so much that we just found ourselves inviting people along, and people saw that it was a lot of fun and people came along to it. But even now, there's people who will come to church at Soul Revival who will just come for the hour, and they're a bit more irregular. They're not quite as, committed to staying, cooking, growing their own vegetables, making their own tomato sauce, and then bring it along and teaching the young people how to cook, and all that takes a whole day or whatever. There's people who they're like, yeah, that's cool. If you want to do that, that's mad. But like, I just want to come to church for an hour. So I think it's about permission giving people heaps of freedom. The other thing is that people need to feel like they can opt in and opt out of it. They don't have to feel like they're stuck in it if they commit to it. I think sometimes as Christians, we can assume the worst rather than assume the best. So if someone can't do something anymore, people go, oh, come on, you have to do it. So, and in the past in Soul Revival, sometimes people have put a bit of pressure on people to, come on, let's all do this as a team. But I think it's really good when people have permission just to be on the outside of it and enjoy that, or have been in the middle and sort of want to just put less effort into it. And so we've described that as ministry slide, that people can either slide into ministry or slide back out of ministry so that they don't feel like they have to do that forever. I don't know if that helps, but that's some of my thoughts.
Any follow-ups, Amy?
I did think of something a minute ago. Now I'm just trying to remember what that was. Oh, yeah, I think I was just going to ask, when you first started at Stu, like switching the youth group from the Friday night to the Saturday night, did the youth who were coming at that time all come with you on the Saturday night, or did that switch kind of make you lose some people along the way?
Thanks. Yeah, actually, that's good to clarify. What we didn't do was move the group to Saturday night. We, as youth leaders, led the youth group on Friday night, and then we hung out together as a community on Saturday night. And so all the youth leaders hung out, and then when they hit 16, the teenagers were invited to come on Saturday night. But yeah, there were people who opted out of that and people who opted in. And also another interesting observation I made was that it was the beginning of our intergenerational experiment, because it wasn't normal for young adults to hang out with senior teenagers and vice versa. So we had compromises with our lifestyle to do that. So we decided not to drink on Saturday nights so that the young people could hang out with us. So that was one example. I don't know, is there anyone else online that would like to share a bit more about the Saturday night thing?
I have one thought, if I can jump in there. Ethan from Soul Revival. I didn't change my name. Sorry, everybody. I was just going to add that something that was really important about Saturday night was, I think, the welcoming nature of the community, and something that's really important is, like, as you were saying, Stu, it's really important to be really permission giving and not put any pressure. But at the same time, we need to find a balance between that and saying, hey, we actually would love you to come and join us. And we really want you to be a part of our community and be friends together. And like in the past, that has been a whole bunch of that comes in different forms, potentially for different people. I know that a lot of my friends go to church, partially because they have been lovingly peer pressured, which is always fun.
That could be a title of a book, Ethan. Lovingly peer pressured.
Lovingly peer. I would love to write that book, because I think there's a lot of stuff behind lovingly peer pressuring people. But it's about like you were saying, but you still have to like be able to give permission, and be really loving in all the stuff. So I'm not, definitely don't hear me going, yeah, what Stu said is great, but I think you should peer pressure instead. I just think it's, that welcoming aspect is something that was really important for me and for the people that I know that I've invited to come and hang out on a Saturday, and then who have gone on to continue to sacrifice their Saturdays and hang out late into the night or whatever.
And I guess a good example of that too was, I remember that we always encourage people, if they had a party on the Saturday night, that we weren't saying, well, you can't go to that party, but we would encourage them to come before the party so we could pray with them and for them as they went to the party, which was so there's that freedom, but there also that, I think that encapsulates really well, Ethan, what you were saying.
And we didn't always get that right. Like sometimes people felt too much pressure and stuff like that, but that's the messiness of church. So and that's why those forums and those communications where people can talk about how things are going, I think we learnt a lot in our approach by constantly coming back and having a conversation about it, and then iterating again, a new iteration that made it better, something like that.
Yeah, and just as a final point on the Saturday night thing, I know that Amy does listen to the podcast, the Shock Absorber podcast, but in season 2, episode 3, we called it On a Saturday Night, and we ran through a lot of the reasons why we chose to make it the first night when we planted. So
That's a good point.
That'll give you some a few more extra tidbits if you're looking for that. Is there any more questions, Tim, or we can? I can't see any on the chat.
No, I don't have any others. Does anyone want to raise anything else from the floor?
I was just wondering if Grace or Michelle's still online. I thought they might be like to share.
They might be in Bible chats, but if they're on, it'd be great to hear from either of them, or Ian, or anyone else.
They've jumped out already.
Yeah, they might have already left.
Let's wrap it up. Like that's our latest gathering that we planted, West Ryde, and those guys are doing fantastic over there. We've been really encouraged by what they're doing. Stu, you've been a big part of that, obviously helping them do that. What was the main things that we've learned from doing that? That was the connected to community that we learned, was where we could really start a very small gathering. Yeah.
So Grace was the second year Moore College student when she came to hang out at Soul Revival for a couple of years as a student pastor. And then when she left Moore College, she started work at City Bible Forum in the city. And she and I just had a cup of tea, and she was saying, is there any way we can stay friends into the future? And I said, oh, maybe you could start a Bible study at West Ryde. I'm sure that'd be all right. So I talked to Peter Haywood, our bishop. He was cool with it. So Grace then started that with Michelle, and then they got a group of people together and they started meeting for Bible study. And then over time, that's grown to 17 people, even during COVID. So at the moment, they're considering like, what's the next step? And so I had some chats with Glenn last year, our Archbishop, about that, and the Bishop of North Sydney, and just because that's a bit unusual for us to plant something on the other side of Sydney. But I think there's been a bit of bit of interest in that. And when people have asked us why would we plant another church in the West Ryde area, our response has been, well, it'd be really interesting to take the intergenerational ideas and the soul revival way of doing it and see if it would work outside of the Solomon Shire and with a group of people who are from Asian background as it started, because the whole team's got Chinese background. And so it's been a really lovely journey. And I think we've learned a lot more from them than they've learned from us. And I think they've actually changed soul revival in the Solomon Shire a lot because they've come from a Chinese background and most of us come from an Anglo background here in the Shire. So that's been cool. So the way Grace has been thinking about it is apparently within educational systems, there's this thing called a connected community idea. And the idea is that you have a central place where the teaching comes from that central place, but you can have little communities of people that can talk about what they've learnt together and grow together from that. And Grace thought that might be a new, I mean, other churches do similar things, but it might be a good idea to go from a Bible study that they call Bible chats to maybe that group of people could watch the service online and then talk about it and have dinner afterwards. And then if it got big enough, it could become a service. So that's where we brought in that word Vesper. That's like a little pre-church community. And then now they're getting to a point where they can have a formal service. So they're currently looking for a location in the area that might be willing to host them. The great news too is they've had about half of the group are non-Christian people who've come from different backgrounds. And this year, 2 of the group became Christians and they've decided to get married, and that's really lovely. And it's just a really nice story. So I think that's been really interesting. And could I just encourage people too, that if you do come up with new ideas too, we'd be really keen to hear it, because I think the sharing of ideas is the way forward. And I suppose today what we wanted to really get across is we wanted to say, let's keep exploring as Australians, let's stick to our theology. Let's, have a really strong theological approach, but let's be open to experimentation and trying new things. And then if we find something that seems to be fun, maybe share that around.
Yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for your time, guys. We're actually going to wrap the conference up now. Just before we do that, though, I just want to say thank you so much for everyone that's participated and been part of this and joined us on this experiment, which we decided to do back at was it the start of this year? Yeah, I think that's when we decided we really wanted to do it. Unfortunately, we couldn't meet together, but we're really excited that we were able to do it online. And next one will hopefully be in person. So that we're excited for that. I just want to thank the guys that have helped put this together. Braden particularly, who's on the technical side, and also Ethan, who helped him set it up. So that's awesome. To Jai, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Stu, thank you very much. To Tim as well, thank you. And also Paul, who've all come together and we've all done everything in a really fun way. So I hope you had a good time.
And thank you, Joel.
Oh, you're welcome. Not a problem at all. I just wanted to say that if you do want to keep continuing to talk about these ideas, there's a couple of ways we can do it. We have a Discord channel open, which is actually, if you're listening to the podcast or watch it on YouTube, you can just click into that. Also, you can just email me, which is joel@shockabsorber.com.au. But we'd love to keep continuing to talk about intergenerational, which we think it's a really great way to do church and to really grow and love God and love others, as you spoke about before from Matthew 22:37-40. So we'll leave it there. But we are going to say that does end the formal time. But if you do want to hang around and chat about these ideas in a less formal setting, and we'll just be sitting online for the next half hour or so. And if you still want to ask any questions with a little bit less formality around, then we'll just be here. So if you want to stay on Zoom, we'd love that. But please feel free to have the permission to log off now. But once again, thank you very much. And as always, we'd like to finish with a one-way.
One-way.
Thanks, guys.
Hey everyone, it's Joel, just jumping back on to say thank you so much for listening. Again, we really, really appreciate everyone who's got involved. Now, if you want to keep getting more involved, if you have any questions about implementing the shock absorber from this episode or anything related to the shock absorber and intergenerational ministry, you can get in touch with us in a number of ways. The first way is you can email me, joel@shockabsorber.com.au. Another way is you can jump on our Discord server, which the links are always in the show notes. So you can just jump on that and join the conversation. You can put a comment on a YouTube channel, but if you're not interested in just getting in touch with us, the other thing you can do is just keep listening. So subscribe to our YouTube channel at Soul Revival Church, or subscribe. Keep listening on your favorite podcast app. We love it. We love talking about intergenerational ministry. We love that people are getting involved and thinking it's a great way to do church, as we do as well. But I just want to say thank you very much, and finish up as usual with a one way.